Okay, so we're back. So I'm sure everyone heard that loop about 400 times. So that was me. I had Teams still going, so apologies. So yeah, just want to get into it. Rav, if you could just give us a really quick intro just about your journey, who you are, because we're going to dive into a bit deeper, but just so people who don't know who you are and what you've been up to, just let them know.
Hi, everybody. I'm a pastry chef, and I've been a pastry chef for about 9 years, and I've worked my way up in kitchens, all the way through the ranks, from a commie all the way to a head of pastry. I've written 2 cookbooks now that are all based on sweet stuff. I write for newspaper columns. I do a little bit of TV presenting, a little bit of live cooking, and yeah, I basically just love eating and talking about food. I also have 2 companies. One of them helps people in the food world work in places where you're treated well. It's called Countertalk. And my other company is called Damson Academy, and that teaches people how to cook in an accessible way online. And then for every course we sell, we give one back to a kid in the school who wants to learn.
Okay, that's cool. We're definitely going to get onto Damson and Countertalk in a bit. But so I know this is kind of a question I hear a lot from Asian people, but it's like, where are you from? And it's a kind of a question that I actually struggle to answer, but I'm just going to ask you straight out. So where are you from?
Yeah, people would always ask that, and I go, well, I'm from like England, but I'm also Indian, and I like point at my face. My dad is from Punjab, and he moved here when he was like 14. My mum was born in Kenya, Nairobi, and she moved here when she was about 14 as well, but she's Indian. So there's lots of Indians in Kenya. So I'm Indian, basically, but I was born here.
Okay, so do your parents meet in England then?
I always imagined in my head that they'd met on a park bench, but that is not how it happened.
Okay.
So my mum, both my parents had like very difficult times coming here, and they got married at the age of 30 by being introduced to each other. My mum said he was the best option left, and she married him. So that's what happened.
Okay. Do you mind me asking a bit about how your parents got to the UK? Because I'm always interested in people's like stories about how they actually arrived in the UK. Yeah,
I mean, my dad, his dad was in the army, he was in the army for Britain, he was in the British Army in India, came to England with my dad's, there's 7, 8 of them kids, there's a lot of them. They all came here, and then my mum came here from Kenya because there was a scheme saying, you know, all of the Indians were being kicked out of Kenya. So you could go to Canada, you could go to England. I think the other place was New Zealand. And my mum came with her mum and her brother to England because her dad had passed away in Kenya. So my grandma came as a single woman to England and found it very difficult. Actually, they landed in Leighton, didn't really know anybody, and like moved from like a bedsit to a little place to another place, and somehow made it work. But it was very, very difficult for them.
Okay. So how have they found living in England since they got here? Like, do they have different stories or similar stories of like the challenges they faced?
I think very different. My dad had all of his brothers and his mum and his dad, whereas my mum only had her mum and her brother. So my mum almost took over the role of caring for those 2 because my grandma would go out to work every day, and my uncle would also work even though he was still a teenager. And really interestingly, like they knew nobody. And my mum's story I think is so interesting because they came here, knew nobody, had nowhere to live, not much money, and somehow managed to make it work. So my uncle would work, and then he'd work at the cinema after school every day. And then he started selling jeans on a market stall. And then he started investing a little bit into tiny bits of property here and there. Then he made it into hotels and then nursing homes. And now he's a really successful like entrepreneur who has managed to make a really good mark for himself through coming here, working in a cinema and selling jeans in a market stall, which I think is very impressive. Yeah, from nothing. It's very admirable. And then my mum just sort of, she didn't really get an education, but she worked as a secretary. Then she worked as like a dinner lady at my school growing up. Her and her brother are like opposites. And that was a very interesting dynamic because we were cousins, obviously, with his family. and we just grew up with a very rich family, and we were not a rich family. Do you know what I mean? It was a really interesting dynamic seeing how that can play out. And my mum was like a dinner lady, and then she was a full-time stay-at-home mum, really, when she wasn't working in our schools.
Okay. And what about your dad's story?
So my dad, he's brilliant. So he worked for his brothers. They had they used to sell clothes in Whitechapel.
Okay, I live in Whitechapel.
A shop selling clothes in Whitechapel. And then he kept working for his brothers. Then he quit, and my parents decided to buy a shop in Southampton. So I grew up above this shop in Southampton as a kid, just like selling sweets and frozen pizza and stuff like that, you know, little newsagents. And then the shop didn't go very well. So then they moved back to Leighton, and my dad worked as a security guard at newspaper companies and just was trying to do anything. And then he went back to work for his brothers, but then decided at the age of 40 to go and train to be an accountant. So then he got his formal accounting qualification at the age of 40. And then he trained to be a sensei in karate. So he did both of those things when I was a kid. And yeah, he's now like in his mid-60s and working as an accountant.
That's well good. Like retraining to any time of life is difficult. Like I swapped from what I was doing to UX, and that was a battle. So, and kind of accountancy is another level of like difficulty. So tip my cap on that one. So yeah, so I know they've had, that was a really good insight into like their kind of like journey through like making a life for themselves and for yourself. But what I'm kind of interested to understand, what kind of challenges did they face in their day-to-day life from basically not being white in a white space?
Well, I think that my parents are very, very resilient, and we grew up always with the knowledge that if you just work really hard, then you'll be fine. Put your head down, work really hard, don't get involved in other things, and just like do well. And I think my mum coming here, she said it was very tough because she, you know, she didn't know how to pronounce a lot of things. She even felt embarrassed going to the shops asking for certain things. And she said that it was just a whole new world for her. However, people were very, very welcoming, she said, because, you know, there was a big Sikh community in Leighton where they first moved to. And even though they didn't know anyone, because my grandma had been widowed, and, you know, that can be a bit of a taboo when you're, you know, on your own. She said that everybody just rallied around and would help them. And to this day, she still has all of those friends back in Leighton, like the Sikh community, like rallied around. And whenever they had any difficulties, financial, places to live, people would always like try and help them. So my mum is like still friends with like all these random old women that she would say, because that woman helped me when we didn't have any money. Or so I know that there was a Gurdwara in Leighton that we would go to as a kid like every day and just hang out, because it was like the hub of where everyone would get to know each other. And where I did grow up, it was quite racist, and that has like followed us through wherever we've gone to, in the sense of just being different, I guess. And I was talking to someone the other day about this, like we would just get people like shouting racist remarks outside our front door, and it was normal, and you'd just be like, oh, them again. And it happened all the way through to my university, and I don't know, I think that it happens less from my point of view, like from what I see. I think it's like died off a little bit, but definitely faced all of that. My dad said that when he was at school, he faced so much bullying and like loads of racism, because there was like 7 of these Indian boys planted into this school, and I think there was like a massive difficulty there. Okay,
and so you mentioned that you were getting like racist abuse outside your front door. How did it affect you, or how have you dealt with it?
I think, if I'm being honest, when I was growing up all the way until my mid-20s, I wished that I wasn't Indian. I used to always, I had a, like, me and my brother speak about it a lot, because I would always be so embarrassed of the fact that I had an Indian family. I didn't want people to come around, and I didn't want to eat Indian food, you know, in my packed lunch. And I thought that being different was not a good thing. And I remember always like changing the way I would speak, not pretending that I couldn't pronounce Indian words in a specific way, even though I definitely knew how to, or not like being embarrassed if I was in Indian clothes, you know, on the way to a wedding, and all of those things just made me feel so embarrassed, because I went to schools that were majority not Indian, and I was always other. And it would always be like, oh, she's decent for like an Indian girl. That was like a common thing that people would say about me. And I remember just thinking, oh, I wish I wasn't Indian. Because of that. I mean, and now I've really embraced it and I love it, and I'm like, I always shout about it. My grandma's all over my Instagram. I'm always, you know, blasting my Indian music, and it's great now, but I wish I had that. That's why I do it so much, because I want to show people who are young that it's great to be yourself. You shouldn't be embarrassed about it. I wasted way too much time being embarrassed about who I was.
Of course, yeah. I had exactly the same kind of mentality. When I said earlier, like when people say where are you from, I never know what to say, because my family are Sri Lankan, moved to Malaysia, and then moved to England. So they're immigrants in everywhere they kind of gone. So I'm always like, well, I don't feel British, so I don't really know the answer to that one. But it was kind of the same thing, that me and my sisters, I've got an older sister, and we was both the same. I think because she got racially abused at school quite a lot from like young. And like it kind of just filtered down, and we would just be like just trying to hide the fact that we were Asian, apart from the fact obviously like we look it. But my mum went to, like, coming from a colony, I think it's a little bit different as well, because Malaysia was a real like British stronghold. So they had an understanding of British life and cooking. But when my mum came to England, she actually went to like English cooking lessons so that if anyone came round, they wouldn't be like, oh, what's this? Yeah. Kind of thing. And but we would still always be like really like nervous if people came round, but my mum would always just make sure she cooked like whatever people wanted. But that was her, because she was quite adaptable, which is great for me. But it's interesting, because I'm just interested also, like you said, like now you're really like proud of your heritage. What can you pick a moment, or do you understand what's kind of made that change in you? What's like lit that fire?
I think one of the biggest game changers for me was, obviously I started chefing, not in Indian cuisine at all, pastry chefing, and then I landed in an Indian restaurant, and I was the only British person. Everybody was from India, and we would speak Hindi all day, and my Hindi is not very good, I speak Punjabi, and they were like old uncles, you know, and I just remember having this overwhelming feeling of being completely relaxed and being myself. Like I could say whatever, like silly things, I could eat whatever I want, like the most delicious food all day. We'd all look after each other, and like being able to just talk about things I wouldn't talk about or shy away from, just felt so open. And from that moment, I remember being like, oh, I'm letting go of this, because I love being Indian. Like I loved that I could be in that environment and like submerge myself in like trying to understand the Hindi, and like, you know, cooking with them, and like connecting so much via food, and then being like, this was so natural to me, because I grew up eating all of this food. I'd like locked it away in a cupboard, and now it's like, it's there. And also in the food world, now it's like, if you have something different about you, it's really cool. But it wasn't, but it's really cool, you know? And it kind of just felt like, oh, I feel like, yeah, I have all of this knowledge about all this amazing food that none of these people have. And you know, I remember I went to work at a restaurant called St. John, and they found it really odd that I didn't know anything about British cheese, and I didn't know anything about like what a celeriac was or what a quince was. And I was like, because I didn't grow up eating any of it, I didn't know that it was normal to have cheese after dinner, like as a thing. I was like, what are you talking about? What is this stuff? However, like, and I remember feeling alienated and quite weird about not knowing and embarrassed. But then when I went to work at the Indian, I remember I was like, well, they don't know anything about all of this type of food. And now, do you know what I mean? It really changed the way I thought about food. And I think food education with kids is really important, which is why Damson Jelly is so like into getting it into schools, because food education isn't really taught in schools.
No, definitely not. Okay, I'm starting to see a few kind of questions come through in the comments, so we'll just interweave them where we can. So the first one's really good. So what is one thing you would like people to better understand about your heritage?
I don't know. I think that I really work hard on my like Instagram or whatever to show people But, you know, I lived with I just had a comment about my,
yeah, someone's asking.
And yeah, I lived with my grandma for a few years whilst I was funding a company, and, you know, all her silly quirks and like just the mundane, silly daily things, and like normalizing seeing like an old Indian woman on Instagram and like all of the silly family things that we do. I work hard to like normalize that so people find that an okay thing to watch. Does that make sense? Whereas when I used to do it at the beginning, everyone was like, God, that's so weird. And now everyone, the amount of comments I get about my grandma just brings me so much joy, because she's someone that I used to like feel a bit embarrassed, like, oh, I'm like living with my grandmother. And now I love it. Like, people miss her. And
yeah. I think it's funny because I think a lot of people outside, like a lot of white people, non-Asian people, and I think it's probably for everyone thinks about, not everyone, but people think about different like races as having a completely different way of doing life. But like, whilst there is definitely differences, I think like the real family stuff that you do, it doesn't really matter about like anything to do with color or where you're from. The way you interact with your family, I think in general is pretty similar across the board, and I think it's good. But people had this opinion that, oh yeah, maybe Asian people do things differently, they're probably always just cooking curry at home or like listening to music and plus but yeah, but people are dancing around to music. That's what people do in every household. Like my girlfriend, my fiance is white, and so her family listen to music all the time, and I think I was like, this is what my mum and dad do at home as well. Like, it's just like, it's just, and it's educating people. And I think by showing people like your home life has really helped people like understand that like we are all really the same, guys. Like, it ain't that deep in some certain times.
Like BG will go, my grandmother will go from watching like wrestling.
My nan used to watch wrestling when she used to come to England. Loved
the
it.
UFC, and then it's like Punjabi TV. And I think it's fun to show people that you know, it's not all Punjabi TV all day.
And what is it with like old Asian women who love wrestling? Because when my nan used to come to England, we used to watch WCW and WWF and like fully into it, like and I'm like, it's fake now.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about, but it's common allegedly.
Yeah, that's a mad one. Okay, that's cool. There's a question to both of us actually, so we'll go into this one. So, school is a long to both of you. School is a long time where ethnic minorities feel embarrassed and attached on their culture. What do you think schools can do to improve this and make these minorities feel much more comfortable? I'll let you go first on that one.
Do you want to go first?
No, I'll let you go first. I think.
I think the schooling system is really interesting. I think we have to be really careful of not tokenizing people, especially if you're like a massive minority. You know, you can't make people feel othered, I think. I think it's all about like education in a really inclusive way. And for example, when I was at school, I remember being like one of the only Indian kids in my primary school, and then even at uni, I was like the only Asian girl in my friendship group. I think a lot of it is, and they would say racist shit all the time. I was like, guys, how do you not know that this is not okay? Because all of those girls had never had an Indian friend. I think it's about like just broadening the education of it. Because at school, I only learned about Christianity from a white point of view. And then I only learned about like, there'd be one day when maybe we'd cover the others. And I think even from religion and culture, the two, like, culture isn't really spoken about as much as religion. They cover religion's ticket, but I think culture is a massive thing. And I think just breaking down those barriers to show that we're all like beautiful and amazing people, and we're not separate from each other.
Yeah. Okay. I could really go on a rant about schooling because I've got a whole different opinion about schooling in general. I think like the school system in general is built to like create workers. It's based for the industrial revolution. I could go deep on this. So I think the whole schooling system needs to change. But I think it's really trying to incentivize ethnic minorities to get into teaching, because I think like with everything, you need to see someone doing something or feel that you can see someone in your class who will understand where your story, like everyone's story is different, but like to have those kind of things that those like they understand where you're coming from. So that would be good. If we could get more teachers teaching, that would be great. And I think, yeah, like you said, it's all like schools is really based around religion. and history is very whitewashed. Like, I felt like with my school, in my secondary school, we went right up to the Vietnam War. So we went quite far in history, but like, did we ever talk about really how bad colonialism was? Nah, it was like Great Britain and like the Commonwealth. Like, how's the phrase Commonwealth it don't make no sense to me, because it's common stealing, really. Like, so anyway, I'm probably going to go a bit deep on that as well. But I think changing basically the curriculum would help. And like you said, culture is such a thing which you don't even need to, like, you can't really measure culture in that sense, but talking about it, and maybe it has changed because obviously I went to school a long time ago, but I'm hoping they are doing more things to like celebrate culture, because I think culture is an access point for people. If you can show people, like we're talking about, what you're giving people access to your culture through Instagram and your platform. So if we can give that at a school level and be like, yeah, it's not going to be weird to go to that person's house. Like, they do fun things. This thing is fun. We can all do it. Like, I think that's a really good gateway into doing things. And it's like we said, it's like, I know that the classic thing is racism learned, isn't it? So if we can stop the children who are being influenced by their parents to go down that route of being ignorant, and like, this is a good way to do it, to nip it in the bud early and show from early, like, everything. There are differences. We need to celebrate the differences, show the differences, but there's also so many similarities about when you go home behind your door and when I go home behind my door. Not too much is different.
And I think, you know, the thing about role models is so important. Like, getting more role models into schools to show the differences. When I was at school, I remember like just not thinking all of these career paths were for me, because I'd never really seen anyone else do it. Like, I didn't know any chefs at all in the food world. That's why I probably wasted time going to do a degree before I was like, I'm going to go and be a chef. And I think, like, for example, my friend is an assistant principal at Harris Academy, Greenwich, and I go in there, I think 4 years in a row now, to give a talk about the viable career paths in the food world. Because unless you know that you can go and be a food stylist, it's not just for specific girls who go to a specific cookery school. This needs to be opened up to everybody. This is how you can get into TV production. This is how you can get into food writing, and like open that conversation up and like get more role models in, I think is also a really good way of doing it.
Yeah, well, that's actually a question I was going to have for you later on, but we'll bring it up now. But like, I know you touched on it, so you didn't have any role models. Like, was there anyone at all, regardless of anything, that who you like felt as like who you did see as a kind of role model or a hero growing up?
I mean, I just remember, I don't know about you, I mean, in the food world, I really loved Rachel Koo. I remember watching her on TV being like, this woman is amazing. And you know what? She is actually really amazing. I've like met her and spoken to her in real life. She's so nice. Love her. And when I was growing up, though, anytime there was an Indian person on TV, it would be an event. It'd be like, everybody gather around the TV and let's see how this Indian person behaves. Are they representing us properly? And it was like Connie Huck or Blue Peter.
Yeah.
She's a good one, tick. And then sometimes there'd be a rogue Indian person on Big Brother and you'd all sit there like with your hands in front of your face thinking you're representing everybody right now, like please do a good job, which is ridiculous. That person shouldn't have to carry the brunt of like all Indians in the country, but that's how it was, that's how I felt anyway. But in terms of like food role models, of course, there's like so many chefs that I admire growing up, but none of them really look like me, so that's probably why it took me so long to understand that I could go and do that.
Just give us a quick couple who you did admire.
I mean, I always loved Rick Stein, like big fan of Rick Stein. But I also loved like Magic Jeffrey, and also loved watching Nigella as a kid, and Keith Floyd, funnily enough. I loved James Martin, like all of Michel Roux, Raymond Blanc. Like I was a massive Raymond Blanc fan, and then I managed to get to Le Manoir and cook, and I remember thinking it was like the best day of my life. So yeah.
Well, you mentioned James Martin. I've seen you on James Martin. Like, how was it like going to like cook there? That must have been the moment as well, right?
Yeah, because I used to watch Saturday Kitchen every Saturday, and I remember just like when I got there, I was like, James Martin. He was so nice. That was great. Loved that.
That's good. And one of our mutual friends was just on Saturday Kitchen like a few weeks ago. That Phil.
Yeah.
But I'll put a link in the chat for that later. I just got to big up my voice, Phil. But God, there's so many questions coming through as well. Like, thanks everyone for like firing questions through. I think like one question's kind of talking about, I know it's about parents pushing people towards different careers, like, did you ever feel any pressure from your family to follow a certain path?
Yeah, I mean, I have so much to say about this, because in the food world, especially last year during lockdown, there was all this conversation about why are there not enough ethnic minorities working in kitchens, working in restaurants, being chefs. And I had a bit of a problem with that conversation, because how I feel about it personally, and I speak to my friend Nat about it a lot because she's really into stats, the teacher at Harris Academy. We talk a lot about data and where kids are going. And I think that there's no problem in the fact that a lot of kids whose parents are first generation immigrants who've come to this country want their kids to go into something that they see as stable and professional, because they're only watching out for their kids. So my parents wanted me to go and have a professional job. They wanted me to work in like computers or go and be a doctor, even though they probably knew that that wasn't for me. And they wanted something professional. My brother works in finance. And I don't see that as a bad thing. I see it as them having a fear, coming from a place of fear and wanting stability for their children. And creativity is not seen as like a stable income. And if you look at the school statistics in the whole of the UK, African girls do really well. Indian boys and girls do really well. However, you've got to look at where those kids are going and what industries they want to go into. A lot of those kids go into professional industries like doctors, lawyers, finance. And then you look at I have so many discussions with restaurant people. Those kids and their parents are not telling them, oh, why don't you go and be a chef? Instead of going to earn 30 grand in your first job or 22 grand, go and be a chef and earn like £6 an hour and work 70 hours a week. Like, it's not something that parents want their kids to do, right? And I think that in the schooling system, white working class boys do the worst across the board, right? And a lot of those boys go into like BTEC and then will go in to learn how to cook and then work their way up into restaurants, which is why a lot of those kids who've started there have become the head chefs. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the beautiful thing about the food world and hospitality is it's open to anyone. You can enter with no qualifications. You don't need to even have a CV. You just walk in and say, I will physically show you how good I am, and then I will rise up like that. That is one of the most beautiful things about food world. So my argument was always, well, let's make our industry better and more attractive to people and viable, as opposed to just saying that everybody should be entering it. Because actually, the food world is not always the best place to work. You're not always treated very nicely, long hours, not enough pay, and it can be like a really brutal environment. Why don't we fix that, make ourselves more appealing before we start saying that everybody should come and work with us? Like, I have a lot of career changes when I'm heading up pastry teams who are like in their 30s, they've gone to cookery school at 30 and said, I worked in an office for a while and now I want to come and be a chef and I'm looking for around 30k starting salary. And I say, I'm sorry, I can give you £11 an hour at a push, but it's going to take you about 10 years to get onto a salary that will be okay for you. And there's all of this stuff that we need to fix as an industry before we start saying that it's like, come and join us. So that's why Countertalk exists, I guess. I have a lot to say about this.
That's good. Well, that's a good segue, because I was going to say, like, I know a bit about Countertalk, but obviously it's going to be way better to hear from you. So yeah, just want to like tell everyone about Countertalk and how it came about and what you're doing with it and kind of where you want it to go.
Yeah, I mean, so Countertalk is a company that I founded 3 years ago now, or 4 years ago. And I started it up as an idea because I'd been in restaurants for about 7 years at that point. No, 6, I don't know, a while. And I had worked from the bottom of the bottom up. And I felt that there were some kitchens that were beautiful and amazing, some that were really awful and terrible and horrible and stuff that you should never have to endure. And I remember it was when I worked at St. John. It was one of the best places I've ever worked. It was just amazing. It was like liberating. It felt like non-school uniform day every day. Everybody was lovely. They cared about the staff. You would eat a meal together once a day or twice a day if you were on a double. You had your set days off. Like, you had a life outside of restaurants, which I didn't know was possible. I was going to leave the chefing world until I landed there. And then when I left St. John, I then started working in other terrible kitchens. And I was like, why do places not know if they just value their staff a bit, they won't leave, so you won't have high staff turnover, which is going to cost you more money. You're going to get more reliable staff who are going to make food for your customers who will keep coming back, so you'll generate your restaurant more. like people are wasting time treating people badly, which is then tarnishing the industry, tarnishing like the longevity of people that want to work in it. And I was like, why don't we just shout about the places that do it well without blacklisting people, but then also educating companies that you can do it well. Let's like break this negative pattern and start getting healthy work environments as a normalized thing in the food world, because I love working in food and I love being a chef. I just want more people to come in, enjoy it and not leave. Because at the moment, people enter, they try it, and then they leave. And it's like a massive reoccurring pattern. And so I just started it up as an Instagram page, being like, this is a really fun place to work, by the way. And I was doing it all for free. I was hosting events for people to network and get to know one another. And I was running it all whilst working full-time as a chef to fund things like the drinks at the events, the venues, and all that stuff. And it started to do really well. I realized that lots of other people felt the same way. And then I realized that I was just basically advertising for companies for free. So I turned it into a jobs board, which I self-funded, and then I had to take it down during lockdown because it's too expensive to run. And I was running it all myself. And then I like brought it back again this year in a much bigger way, and put so much more of my own money into getting the jobs board a lot better, a lot more functioning. I now have 2 people that work with me. It's a proper team. And we do so much about staff welfare, education, leadership, and how, and then we also do a lot of transparent career advice, how to write a cookbook. I tell people, I got £6,000 for my first cookbook. Don't expect to get rich, but this is how you can do it. And this is how royalties work. And like, this is how you can meet an agent. Here, go and meet this agent. And we've like got people cookbook deals, and we like break down barriers, and like doors that are normally closed, we open them to people, and we say, well, this is how I got into TV presenting. Do you want to like have a contact? Because here's a contact that you can meet directly over Zoom. And we do all of that stuff. And we do a lot of like encouraging people to meet and chat and like start talking a bit more. And yeah, it's like my passion, which you can probably tell.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. When I first heard about it, I was like, that's so sick, because like it is like, from someone who like has got into food loads over the last few years, and like I'm thinking maybe it's a route for me I want to do. Like when I initially like thought about it, probably, but even before like Phil, who's like a mutual friend of ours, before he even got in it, I just thought it was a world like it was too late for me. I couldn't get into it, and there's no way through. And I'm just wondering, like, is there like a lot in terms of the people you help? Is it skewed towards women, or is it just a huge group? And like, how many people of colour are really coming through for help from you?
Well, I think that it's a massive mixed bag. When I first started it, it was quite a small community of people, and now I feel like Countertalk is the right place, right time. People finally get it. They're like, you know what? Staff retention is really important. Treating people nicely is really important, because also there's not enough chefs and not enough people in the food world to go around. And I think that in terms of demographic, it's really mixed. And I'm really proud of that, because one of the things with Countertalk is I never say, as a platform, we never just say, there's not enough diversity and inclusion in the industry, because actually there are some incredibly diverse, beautiful, amazing people that work in the industry, but people just don't talk about them. They exist, but people don't talk about them. So one of the jobs of Countertalk is always like, okay, well, let's find those people and let's just shout about them instead of tokenizing them and saying, we're doing a week of diversity. It's like, no, we just feed all of those people into our normal, how do you say it, rhetoric? Is that the right word? Or like, our normal way of talking about people.
Yeah.
There are some incredible people that just don't get the spotlight because it's not cool and it's not like hip at that moment. So we've got some amazing role models, and luckily we attract them, and they always want to like help us and work with us, and we're pretty good at spotlighting them.
Do you want to just shout out a few so people at home can have a little like check into them? So
we love Knox, who's the head chef of the Pie Room at Holborn Dining Rooms. She's on Instagram. I think this is how you start her name. She's Knox. She's from South Africa. She's incredible, just a brilliant human. So we shout about Knox quite a lot. We've got Urshin Chang, who's the owner of Bao. We had the 2 Kieran and Tong Tong from Chinese Laundry, 2 incredible chefs. I don't know if they'll ever bring Chinese Laundry back, but it's one of the best restaurants. We have so many people that I've now like lost my train of thought. But go on Countertalk and filter through. You will find a million different people.
Do you want to just quickly drop the URL in the chat so people can have a look, and I'll have a look through some questions, because I feel like there's so many questions and I'm like, amazing. Thanks everyone, like I said, for like firing them through. So I know we kind of touched on this a bit earlier, but do you identify yourself as an Indian or British? And how do you find interactions with Indians who are not born and brought up in Britain?
I would identify myself as British Indian. And I taught chefs in Mumbai how to make sourdough 2 years ago. I went to Mumbai, I did a consultancy job, and I loved it. Like, yeah, my Hindi isn't very good, I understand it. And I think that sometimes there's a barrier, especially when I worked at the Indian restaurant, between the fact that I was a British Indian woman and I wasn't born in India. However, I'm pretty open and like, I'd like to think quite like nice to people from what I've heard. And I find it really easy to get on with most people, and I don't find that there's a barrier. I think I bond with most people over food. And even no matter where you're from, if we can enjoy some food together, talk about food, it's always like my first question, then it's going to be a pretty good friendship. I'm always like, if you don't like eating food, you've got loads of dietary requirements, you've got food friends.
Food is that great equalizer, isn't it? Like, but yeah, definitely. I just feel like I'm a bit of a snob. I'm like, don't you like that? Okay, cool. Moving on. But yeah, I think food in general is that equalizer. Like, I know it's pretty like a classic line trotted out, but it's the way which you can like, it's another thing which you can like, it doesn't really matter where you're from. Like, I think
commonality around food, and you can learn so much from other people, everybody, about food, you know, and their background and what they like to cook and what they like to eat. So I think actually food is one of the biggest bridges to meeting people, and I feel like that's a good opener.
Yeah, for sure. One question which actually, yeah, like the whole overarching thing of this thing is the South Asian Heritage Month. And I just wondered, have you heard of South Asian Heritage Month?
I have heard of it through the email from you.
Yeah.
No, I hadn't heard of it.
Nah, me neither. And I think doing my research into it's only a couple of years on, I think it only started really 2019, but because of lockdown, it didn't really have anything happening. One of the questions is, what does South Asian Heritage Month mean to you? I know it's a difficult one to answer, but based off the premise that we're trying to now shine the spotlight on the whole of South Asia, which is again quite a broad thing to do, what are your thoughts about it, and is there anything that you would like to see from it going forward?
I think, like, being a South Asian woman, sometimes I feel like it's just not cool, you know? It's not the cool one. And I feel like we need more representation and like bringing those positive role models more to light. Because at the moment, I feel like a lot of the attention doesn't go on South Asian people in general, because it's not seen as like that cool. Whereas culture is so rich and there is so much that you can like bring from it. But maybe, I don't know, just a bit more of a little spotlight on amazing people that have a South Asian heritage.
Okay. That's good.
That was a big question, sorry.
Yeah, no, these questions are great. I'm just trying to see. There's a question around tokenism, actually, which you touched on earlier. So how would you improve South Asian representation in advertising without tokenism? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think it's about like the education and where it's coming from. I get asked to do a lot, and I can spot it a mile away if I'm going to be a token for that reason. Like, for example, I've been asked to do a pop-up with 5 chefs, 4 white men, and I'm in there too, as the 5th person. And straight away I know, someone said to them, get someone in of colour. And I know that that's why I'm there. So I say no to projects like that, because I say, you haven't done your research because you've chosen 4 white male chefs, not even another woman in there. And I know that you're putting me in there as like your diversity tick. And I think it's fair enough if I was the only person of colour, but that person who's organised that has done no research into other people that could get involved. And I think it's actually about the intention of when you're asked. Because sometimes I am asked and I'm the only person, but it's we'd love to just like learn more and like open our eyes a bit more, as opposed to pretending that it's not really a thing. It's a thing. Be honest about it. Let's talk about it. and ask me if I know anyone else who would be appropriate for this event, and I'll give you 1,000 names. Do you know what I mean? I feel like there's a line between pretending and then also just being like really open about it. And I think that, and also I don't like being asked to do something just for like a tick reason, and then I find out that they're paying people and they're not paying me, and all that stuff happens all the time. It's like you've got to put a bit of work in there. And then,
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because like even like with my current job, like I moved to Scotland, and so I was the only like Asian face in the company, and I always wondered, partly was I employed because of for quotas, or was it because they think I can do the job? But as I've like worked here, I think it's because of my ability. I hope so anyway. But it's interesting, like finding yourself in white spaces and like always questioning whether like, is it because you're here? Is it because I just want to bring numbers, want to get the quotas up, tick their boxes? Because kind of digressing, but looking at the sites I work on, building websites, I mean, I see so many like on client sites about like DEI, and like everyone's bang on that DEI, but I'm like, what does that even really mean to companies? And like, is it another tick box? So I think it's interesting because a lot of the companies within Dentsu are involved with trying to change the advertising world and how it's basically run in terms of like trying to make sure that we have better vendors, that we're making sure that we're bringing in diverse teams to run projects front and behind camera and campaigns and all of this. So it's quite interesting, that question about tokenism and your response.
Equally, I think it's so important to not internalize that, because I know that there are a lot of people in the food world who think, oh, she's only doing that because they needed a brown face. And I think if I internalized that, then I would feel lesser. However, I know I'm a really good pastry chef, and I'm really good at what I do. So I'm more than deserving to be in these spaces. But there is, I think it's really important to know that and be like, no, I'm really good, and I'm not here, for a tick. And I think that like brings your power back, and that gives you confidence. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's such an important point, because I think I don't know if it might just be down to people, but I feel like a lot of first generation immigrants, children, or in general, and I internalize a lot because the way to fit in was to say nothing and just to like yeah, I know we talked about like the attitude of like just keep your head down and work, and that was kind of that's the attitude my dad and my mum instilled in us. But like the idea of like ignoring all the other stuff is going to come back to bite you eventually, like, because it is really hard, like internalizing so many things. So it's really good to see that like you're like, nah, that ain't me. Like, I'm here, I'm sick at what I do.
Yeah.
You're gonna see it, because like how many things are you doing at the moment? It's mental. Because like what you've read the book. Go just do a quick rundown of what you're actually on at the moment.
Quite a few things. Yeah, just handed in the second book. Filming Junior Bake Off, second series that I'm on, which is great. Running Countertalk, pretty much a lot. Running Damson Academy, writing for The Guardian twice a month, and a few other things that are secret at the moment. But yeah, I don't have many days off.
Yeah, that sounds pretty full on, but that's so good. I had another question linked to that. Yeah, kind of actually just talking about front and behind the camera. What's the diversity like on Bake Off in terms of production team?
I mean, me and Liam are the only people of colour in the whole team, apart from our wonderful makeup artist. I think, yeah, not very diverse at all. And I spoke to them very bluntly about that the other day. Good. I said, you need to have a scheme where you open your doors up and you allow more people in for experience to work their way up and to learn, because at the moment it feels very guarded. Do people like it when I say things like that? Probably not. However, you got to say it, and I always say it.
I think, yeah, that's so important.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got 10 minutes to go and there's about 1 million questions. I'm going to ask just a couple more questions myself, and then we're going to just rattle through the questions in the group. Actually, the last thing I was really going to ask you about was, do you want to talk about Damson jelly? Because again, like I've started doing the course, and like looking at it is so good. So I'm excited to crack through it. But yeah, to explain to people, because there's a whole other side which is amazing to it as well, beyond the cooking side. So
yeah, so basically I started Damson Jelly Academy this year, and during lockdown last year I started doing online cookery courses, just like filming them on an iPhone. They did really well. However, you know, they were like botch job put together really quickly. But Damson Jelly Academy is all about like producing high quality cooking courses at a like ridiculously small price. And what it's about is, when I went to cookery school, it cost me about £6,000 to £7,000 for 2 terms, which was about 6 months. And I couldn't afford it. And I remember I had to drop out before superior because I didn't have enough money. It was another £4,000 to continue. And my whole thing with Damson Jelly is getting all of that education that I learned, putting it into an online course for people, as opposed to like whatever £7,000, it's £100. And I teach you everything that you need to know in that basic course, and the intermediate's coming, which I'm filming at the moment. And it's all about like making the food sciencey, like bits that you will only know in a cookery school, accessible to everybody. And you know, we break down the theory. You get all your like theory sheets. If you're into that, we do a talk on the theory and behind the scenes, video tutorials, recipe guides, substitutions, FAQs, ask us questions. And it's just like an accessible way of learning about food. You can do it on the side, you can do it, you know, just like whack it out in one go. And the idea is that for every course that we sell, we give one back to a kid in the school that wants to learn. And usually we've partnered up with Harris Academy Greenwich, and it's kids who maybe can't afford to go to cookery school, or who are considering a career in food and just want to learn more. And we're trying to now get some funding to sponsor the ingredient side, because that's a whole other thing. And just making learning about food more accessible, because I wish that I had done something like this back in the day. It would have saved me a lot of money, and it would have made me feel more comfortable entering into kitchens. I do it from a kitchen point of view, and from like this is like realistic. You don't need to worry. At cookery school, you learn a lot of faff, and this is real. This is like, don't worry about the things that you think you like are going to help. But you know, I feel like there's a lot of rituals, and people think, oh, I can't do this with caramel, I can't do this with a meringue. It's like, yes, you can. This is how you do it. This is how you fix it if it goes wrong, and this is how you're going to make it taste even better. So yeah.
That's good. I think like cooking, but baking to me especially, is like there's science and there's rules, and like if you mess it up, like it's you have to start again. But it's good to hear that there's actually like if anything goes wrong, there's always something you can do to save. And
I'm kind of like a real food lover. So Damson Jelly Academy is all about seasonality, and like utilizing incredible produce and not worrying about things that are like pretty and like unachievable. It's like, no, this is gorgeous, this tastes better, taste it. Because I think understanding that link between taste and being able to adapt is a whole other power. And that's what it's about. You don't learn that at cookery school. It took me years to get my head out of that. So yeah.
Okay, that's cool. All right, let's just go through some of the questions then. So here's one I was looking at just now. So what are your experiences today of subtle, so unconscious racism? The person who asked it said their partner finds she experiences a lot in the corporate world. Is there any advice you would have on how to be an ally, and more importantly, how to eradicate it?
That's like, that could take like half an hour conversation, that question. Yeah, I experience it all the time, even to this day. And I think I got a lot of it in kitchens from superiors. And the thing about subtle racism, or like subtle ways where you're excluded, is you can't always put your finger on it, and your other people will never understand it. And sometimes you look like that person that's like, oh, she's just being difficult, or she's just making a thing of it for the sake of it. When I think that there needs to be more education around other people understanding. They'll never understand, for example, but when you say that you feel uncomfortable about something, those people need to listen without immediately thinking, oh, she's just like saying it to be difficult. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I feel like I'm always, I'm sometimes fearful to say something in case people are like, oh, you're only saying that just to like make a thing about it. But no one else can like gaslight you into thinking. Do you know what I mean? You get a lot of that. And right. It's about just educating yourself a bit more, and then not being that person to tokenize, but also to exclude. It's hard. It's going to take time, but I do think things are getting better. I really do.
Yeah, like I've heard what like you said, like I feel like a lot of the times you think it and people are so, because of like the anti-wokeness kind of things and so many things like in pop culture now where the tide's turning and people in a good way but also reverting back, and people are like, oh, you're just being extra, you're just saying that, like, oh, it's not that deep, like the classic line, it's you're playing the race card. I'm like, bro, it's really not that, like, so those phrases and stuff like that make it harder for you next time to be like, when you start to doubt yourself, you're like, oh, is it, am I like being super sensitive now? But I don't think it is, because I notice with a lot of like people, and I say a lot of white people, they ain't afraid to say, no, that's wrong.
Yeah, like I get it a lot with like not being paid the same as people, or like asking for more. And one of the things I really work on is like speaking up, because I know I speak up really fearlessly, because I know it might be really uncomfortable for me, but I'm making it easier for the person behind me. Whenever I remind myself of that, I'm always immediately like, okay, I'm doing this for other people, it's okay. Whereas if I get into my own head about speaking up and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose this job, and then I'm going to not have any money, and then all of these things, I remove all of that and I say, well, I'm doing it. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to help the person behind me. And if I know that, then I feel way more like okay about saying things. So yeah.
That's an amazing way to look at things, because I think a lot of people, like in general, this is more like a general comment, but the feeling of community and looking out for one another, even with COVID and how that's had an impact at the start to make it more people looking out, I feel like it's gone the other way. And in general, people don't want to look out for other people and think about the impact you have and what it's having for people behind you, because that is exactly it. It's like there's younger people, or even there's other people, like you're saying, there's people who come to career changes, and it might be like a 35-year-old Asian woman who's like, oh, I want to do this, but because you're going forward with that mentality, you're going to make it better for her. So that's just like, that's really good. I rate that a lot. Right, let me see what else. We've probably got time for one more. There's one question. This is unrelated, but are you more team Prue Leaf, Paul Hollywood, and Mary Berry? What little like side are you on that one?
I've only met Paul Hollywood. I haven't met Mary Berry or Prue Leaf. So it's not, I can't pick. I haven't met the other two.
Okay, that's a very diplomatic answer.
Mary Berry is like, queen.
OG. Okay, so I think this one, so this question is interesting that you mentioned the expectation from Asian community and other ethnically diverse backgrounds to put our head down and get on with our jobs. As a result of which, when we speak up, we are often questioned on our tone, policed, and often results in a lot of gaslighting and shocked reactions, as that counters for popular expectation from Asians about being silent and just getting on with things. Have you had similar experiences? I feel like we might have kind of touched on this one already.
Yeah, I mean, I think that also, like, even being a woman, you often are made to think that you can't say certain things, and that also you need to be quiet and like a bit subservient. And also I feel like people, in my experience, are way more comfortable telling me off or like addressing me in a difficult way as opposed to my male counterpart, because they see me as weaker. So I'm always going to be the one to like speak right back at you in the most honest and constructive way. And people find it really challenging, but I never do it in a way that's like coming from a place of hate. I'm always like coming always from love. That's like my biggest thing. I'm like, look, and I always like, I had a really difficult time working on a job last year where I was getting so much criticism all the time. So in the end, this is how I address things. I rationalize in my head, I never react straight away. I will rationalize, write it all down, make sense of it. I then go to those people with all of my written feedback, and we have an open and honest conversation. A lot of people can't handle that, but I think that if you come from a place of like love and understanding and compassion, and understanding that everyone comes to you with like their own baggage, then you're going to break it down in a much nicer way. We're all humans, and I always try and like do it through love. That makes a big difference.
Okay. We've just got a little note that we've got a minute to go, so we're going to just quickly wrap up. There's a load more questions, and I think what's been said is that we can follow up with unanswered questions. I might email you them if that's all right. But yeah, thanks everyone for posting questions. But I think, yeah, it's just been amazing. This chat is flown by. I was like, it could go really quick. I still got loads of questions anyway, but like, I'm sure we can just route through them another time. But yeah, thank you very much for your time. It's been like insane. It's been so informative. It's been really good to chat and understand, because yeah, we have shared experiences ourselves, and I'm sure that people who are listening have felt have taken stuff away from this, knowing that like we've all gone through the same things, we've all been through the same things. But I think, like you said, things are changing, but it's going to take people like you who have a platform to keep trailblazing, because really what you're doing is trailblazing. Like, it's mad. I'm like, it's so impressive, and I'm really like thankful for you to be doing that, because there's people much younger who are going to benefit from you, because you're going to kick the door open for them. So like, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everyone.
Cool. I'm not sure if I don't know if that is at the end or not, because it just, but